Ahoy, insomniacs! Welcome to another voyage into historical misery, designed specifically to lull you into a state of mild disinterest and eventually merciful unconsciousness. Before we begin, I invite you to take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below letting me know where and when in the world you're tuning in from. Are you in a bustling city? A quiet countryside? A creaky bunk on a ghost ship, perhaps? Tonight, we cast off into the endlessly damp, wildly over-romanticized world of 17th century piracy. You've seen the swashbuckling films, the heroic rogues, the glittering treasure, the inexplicably good teeth. This will be none of that. Instead, picture this: a wooden tub teetering on a heaving sea, held together by rope, sweat, and sheer apathy. Around you, a crew of lice-ridden men who haven't bathed in weeks, screaming sea shanties at the top of their lungs while defecating over the side of the ship. The air is a rich blend of brine, urine, and regret. Somewhere in the distance, a storm is rolling in, as it always is. You've just woken up, though you never really slept, and you're about to start another gloriously monotonous day of manual labor, shouted orders, and hardtack so full of bugs it counts as protein. Morning comes slowly on a pirate ship, not with the gentle glow of sunlight peeking through gauzy curtains, but with the unmistakable sound of someone coughing phlegm directly onto the floorboards above your head. It's a deep, rattling sound, the kind that makes you question whether the person producing it is human or some sort of sea-dwelling beast. Regardless, it is your alarm clock now. You don't wake in a bed, you wake in a hammock that sags like your morale. It's suspended between two beams in a space so cramped you have to exhale just to roll over. On the upside, if you fall out, the floor is barely 3 feet below you. On the downside, the floor is sticky, damp, and often occupied by a rat the size of a small cat. You name him Reginald. He does not like you. Above deck, the sun may be rising over the ocean, painting the horizon with golden light, but you wouldn't know. You are below deck, beneath 2 layers of timbers, surrounded by unwashed bodies, stale air, and the collective aroma of roughly 30 adult men who believe personal hygiene is a land-based luxury. There is no ventilation. The air has not moved since yesterday, and possibly not since the ship was christened. The scent is layered. First, there's the salt, the briny tang of the sea, ever present and persistent. Then comes the rotting wood, rotting food, possibly rotting dreams. Over that, a bouquet of mildew, wet canvas, spilled grog, and humanity at its most fermented. It's not a smell you get used to so much as one that eventually erodes your ability to smell at all. Your clothes are damp. They are always damp. You're not entirely sure what it would feel like to be dry anymore, but you suspect it's something only nobles and clouds experience. You slept in your trousers because everyone sleeps in their trousers. You also slept in your shirt, which is essentially just a sponge with buttons at this point. It clings to you with a wet desperation, as if it too wishes to escape this life at sea. Getting up involves a delicate sequence of movements. First, you swing one leg out and hope it doesn't collide with someone's face. Then, you wriggle your shoulders free of the hammock's grip. Lastly, you drop to the floor and immediately regret it as you land in a puddle of something. You don't ask, you don't look, you simply move on. You step carefully, sidestepping piles of tools, sleeping limbs, and the occasional empty tankard that smells faintly of yesterday's ration. Your boots squelch. They are always wet inside, even if it hasn't rained. You suspect this is a form of nautical sorcery. As you ascend the stairs to the main deck, your nostrils are assaulted by a fresh wave of pungency, sea spray, tar, and the distinct aroma of someone cooking something that smells both burnt and undercooked. The morning air is chilly and wet. A gull screams overhead, though you can't see it. It's just the kind of disembodied shriek you've grown to accept as part of daily life. On deck, The world is painted in greys and browns. The sky, overcast. The sails, weather-beaten. The crew, dressed in what can only be described as pirate chic, threadbare shirts, patched trousers, and scarves that may have once been red, but now more closely resemble the color of dried liver. Everyone looks vaguely angry, but that may just be their resting pirate face. There is no breakfast bell. There is only the boatswain, a man whose voice could wake the dead and make them wish they hadn't bothered. He shouts orders in a dialect that defies transcription. It's half English, half Seagull, and entirely unpleasant. You are told to git swabbin, which is not a polite request. You pick up a mop that looks like it's seen combat and begin pushing water around the deck in a futile attempt to make it appear slightly less disgusting. This is the pirate version of morning yoga. Swabbing builds character, or at least it builds shoulder pain and an early onset of spinal curvature. Around you, other pirates go about their own chores, untangling ropes, fixing sails, yelling at ropes, yelling at sails. Everything is either being tied, untied, nailed, or sworn at. One man appears to be attempting to reason with a cannon, which is refusing to stay in place. The cannon is winning. Breakfast is eventually distributed with all the ceremony of a sneeze. A crusty, sleep-deprived sailor hands you a wooden bowl and drops something into it. You're not sure what it is, but it's heavy, beige, and emits steam only when insulted. You poke it with a spoon. It does not respond. The biscuit beside it is more solid than your sense of self-worth, and appears to have a small colony of weevils. You eat it anyway, partly out of hunger, partly out of spite. The weevils add texture. Your drink is a tin mug of what the ship calls small beer, a concoction of water, malt, and despair. It is slightly alcoholic, barely cold, and safer to drink than the water on board, which tastes like something filtered through old rope and regret. Occasionally, on special mornings, you may be offered grog, a delightful mix of rum, water, lime juice, and a sense that nothing truly matters. As you chew your way through your breakfast literally, it requires chewing you take in the view. It is water, just water, on all sides, forever, occasionally, a cloud. Less occasionally, a bird. Even more rarely, another ship. Most days, it's just you, the crew, and an endless, featureless expanse of sea that mocks you with its uniformity. Conversations in the morning are minimal. Pirates are not, by nature, morning people. Most prefer to grunt, nod, or swat at each other with rope coils. You attempt to make eye contact with someone and receive a glare that suggests they are currently imagining your face nailed to the mast. You look away. One crew member hums a shanty to himself. It's about a woman named Bess and some truly horrifying things she did with a cannonball. It is, admittedly, catchy. Above, the sails flap lazily in the breeze. The helmsman stands at the wheel, steering with the focused indifference of a man who has long accepted that his life peaked several storms ago. He occasionally consults a compass, which he does not trust, and a map, which is more of a suggestion than an actual navigational aid. The direction? Vaguely west, or possibly north by disappointment. You finish your meal. The bowl goes back in the communal stack, which has not been washed since the ship left port. Hygiene standards aboard are best described as aspirational. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve, because that's what sleeves are for. Then, it's back to work. The morning drags on. Time moves differently on a pirate ship, slower, wetter, and slightly more aggressive. Tasks blend into each other. At some point you are hauling a rope. Then, repairing a sail. Then, being yelled at for doing either of those things incorrectly. You briefly contemplate mutiny, but you don't have the energy or the charisma. Someone shouts about spotting land. It turns out to be a cloud. Everyone goes back to what they were doing. The cloud does not apologize. Eventually, the sun rises high enough to signal that morning has officially ended. You are sweaty, sore, and somehow still damp, Despite the heat, there is no break. There is only the next task. The cycle continues. And that, dear listener, is how mornings begin aboard a 17th century pirate ship, with a cough, a puddle, a bowl of bugs, and the kind of existential dread that pairs beautifully with salted meat. Next, we'll examine the strange, endless rhythm of shipboard life, the watches, the rolls, and what happens when you spend most of your day staring at the horizon, hoping something interesting will happen. Spoiler, it doesn't. Once the morning haze has thickened into the full reality of day, when the sun has climbed just high enough to make your sweat itch and your regrets glisten, you're expected to move from swabbing to something more productive. Or at least, something more laborious. On a pirate ship, the line between the two is virtually non-existent. There is no formal schedule, there is no clipboard, no motivational speech, and certainly no team huddle. There is only the boatswain again bellowing commands, like a man who has been personally wronged by your existence. His voice cuts through the salty air like a rusty cutlass through an overripe mango. You may not understand what he's saying, but you understand that not moving is a bad idea. Tasks are assigned in the time-honored method of yelling and finger-pointing. You are informed that you are to see to the lines, which could mean anything from tightening the rigging to hanging someone's laundry. Either way, it involves ropes. Everything on a pirate ship involves ropes. It is a floating monument to rope-based architecture. If it cannot be tied, it does not belong here. Your hands are already rough from the previous week of rope handling, but today promises new and innovative ways to introduce splinters to your bloodstream. You dutifully march to the starboard rigging, where a tangled mess of lines awaits like a bored octopus in need of a hobby. You begin the task of unknotting them, a process not unlike solving a puzzle designed by a sadistic child who only had access to wet string and bad intentions. Above you, sails flap and groan, pulled this way and that by the wind and your increasingly poor decisions. Adjusting them requires coordination, something the crew lacks in abundance. The result is a dance of shouted commands, delayed reactions, and at least one man dangling from the mainsail like a confused scarecrow. He insists he meant to do that. No one believes him. Elsewhere, pirates haul crates from below deck to check supplies. You try not to look inside. You learned your lesson last time, when opening a barrel of salted meat revealed something that was only technically food and mostly tentacle. One man is restocking the powder room, carefully counting out bags of gunpowder and looking more anxious than a priest at a brothel. Another is sharpening cutlasses with the expression of someone imagining how they'd use them in an HR meeting. The quartermaster struts across the deck like he owns the place. Technically, no one owns the ship. It's a democracy, of sorts. But in practice, it's a democracy in the way a bar fight is a negotiation. The quartermaster enforces the captain's decisions, distributes supplies, and reminds everyone, constantly, that he doesn't have time for your whining. He carries a ledger not for accuracy, but for the appearance of authority. You once saw him write, "beans," in it, then cross it out and write, "maybe no beans." That was the end of the matter. Back at the rigging, the knot you are untying has somehow become 2 knots. This is a common phenomenon. Some believe the ship is haunted by a ghost with a fondness for maritime mischief. Others blame the gremlin who lives in the rope locker. Most blame you. Regardless, the ropes remain knotted, your fingers remain raw, and the sun continues to glare down at you like it, too, is judging your incompetence. Suddenly, a shout goes up. "Sail ho!" And for a brief moment, there is hope. Hope that perhaps the day's monotony will be interrupted by something dramatic, like a chase or a fight or, at the very least, the possibility of someone else doing all the hard work, while you observe from a strategic crouch. But the shout is a false alarm. The sail in question is a cloud. Again. That particular cloud has already been mistaken for a Spanish merchant ship twice this week. It is, frankly, becoming smug about it. The cook emerges from the galley, trailing a cloud of steam and passive aggression. He is not so much a chef as a culinary war criminal. Today, he is boiling something in a pot that smells faintly of despair and foot. He grunts at you and gestures to the bucket beside him. You nod and carry it where he points across the deck, down the ladder, and into the realm of the men still pretending to sleep. The bucket is hot. It leaks. You lose a tow hair. It's a full-body experience. Midway through hauling the bucket, you are intercepted by the ship's carpenter, who needs assistance moving a plank. Not just any plank, the plank. The one people walk before being shoved rudely into the sea. It requires repairs, having recently given out beneath the weight of a particularly unfortunate mutineer. You help lift it. It creaks ominously. The carpenter mutters something about faulty timbers and cursed lumber. You do not ask for clarification. As the morning inches toward what passes for noon, you're assigned to assist the gunner. This is either a great honor or a slow-motion injury, depending on your definition of success. The gunner is an older man, missing 3 fingers and 1 eye, all acquired in unrelated cannon-related incidents. He teaches you how to clean a cannon using a long rod, a bit of cloth, and no sense of fear. The cannon is not loaded, which is both a comfort and a disappointment. Cleaning involves inserting the rod, twisting it in tight circles, and pulling it out with a great deal of soot and the occasional rat. You nod solemnly, as if this is the life you chose. You have soot on your face, soot on your shirt, and soot in places where soot should never be. You sneeze violently and nearly fall into the powder keg. Your next task is to refill the water barrels. This involves hoisting buckets up from the sea and dumping them into a larger barrel, then adding a dash of vinegar to prevent algae. This, somehow, counts as filtration. The resulting liquid is drinkable in the same way boot polish is edible technically, but not ideally. You take a swig and pretend not to cry. Around this time, someone finally asks the question you've been avoiding. Is it lunchtime? The answer is no. It is never lunchtime when you want it to be. Time stretches like old cheese aboard a pirate ship, warping and sagging in ways that make you question your grip on reality. You feel as though you've been working for 17 hours, but your shadow insists it's still morning. You suspect the sun is mocking you deliberately. In the meantime, you are told to help hoist the anchor. This is a team effort. In the same way building a pyramid is a team effort. The anchor is large, heavy, and uncooperative. The capstan rotating drum used to pull the anchor chain creaks with every turn. You and 5 other miserable souls push the bars around and around, singing a shanty not because you enjoy it, but because it keeps you from weeping. The song involves a goat, a bucket of eels, and betrayal. It has at least 19 verses. Once the anchor is hoisted, the captain finally emerges from his cabin. He is a grand figure, wearing a coat that was once regal but is now mostly patches. His hat is enormous and impractical. His beard contains crumbs from 3 meals ago. He surveys the deck, says absolutely nothing, and disappears back into the cabin. This is standard procedure. You have, at this point, completed the following: swabbed the deck, tied and untied ropes, cleaned a cannon, hauled dubious water, mended cursed lumber, and been disappointed by at least 1 cloud. It is still not noon. Time, on a pirate ship, is like molasses poured down a slope, sticky, slow, and always slightly unpleasant. And yet, there is something comforting in the predictability of it. No one expects genius. No one expects ambition. They expect your back to ache, your clothes to stay damp, and your hands to slowly transform into gnarled claws, suited for rope and salt. You meet those expectations admirably. Soon the ship's bell will clang, signaling the next rotation of duties. The day will continue its slow descent into bruised palms and sunburnt skin. And you, pirate in training, will trudge along, accomplishing menial tasks aboard a vessel barely held together by willpower, barnacles, and spite. Next, we'll dive into the true rhythm of pirate life, the endless march of shifts and watches that ensures no one aboard is ever truly rested and everyone is equally annoyed. If the duties of dawn haven't broken your spirit, and they probably should have by now, you may begin to wonder about hygiene, cleanliness, sanitation. Concepts that, while familiar on land, become almost mythical at sea. On a 17th century pirate ship, hygiene is less a practice and more of a vague, wistful idea, like retirement or breakfast without weevils. First, let's talk about bathing, that thing you used to do back when water came out of walls and didn't taste like rust and eels. On a pirate ship, bathing is achieved one of three ways: falling overboard, being caught in a rainstorm, or getting hit with someone else's bucket of rinse water. None are intentional. All are deeply disappointing. There is technically an ocean all around you. Some might say, why not bathe in that? And to that, the pirate replies, because it's freezing, filled with jellyfish, and sharks like to nibble. Also, climbing back up onto a ship after diving in is an athletic feat most pirates simply cannot achieve without assistance, ridicule, or both. So, instead, they remain salty, perpetually. Internally, spiritually, and externally. Soap exists on board, but it's a precious commodity used sparingly and hoarded with a reverence usually reserved for gold or functioning teeth. It's made from animal fat, lye, and low expectations. If you can get your hands on a lump of it, congratulations. You now possess a sticky, semi-caustic brick that smells like burnt pork and makes your skin feel like it's been insulted. Hair washing? No. The closest you come to that is standing near someone who got doused in seawater during a squall and happened to drip on you. Most pirates wear headscarves or hats, partly to keep the sun out of their eyes, but mostly to keep the grease in. It's common courtesy, really. Shaving is optional and, for most, abandoned entirely. Razors are dull, mirrors non-existent, and anyone with a sharp blade near their throat is generally presumed to be losing a fight. Beards are cultivated, not out of fashion, but inertia. Some are proud of them. Others simply forget they have one until a crewmate points out it has started collecting insects. And then there's the matter of teeth. You won't need them for long. Most pirate diets are hard enough to break a molar and soft enough to rot the rest. There is no toothbrush, no floss. Dental hygiene is performed with rum and prayer. If you have a toothache, the solution is to remove the tooth with a pair of pliers and a few sturdy mates to hold you down. Anesthesia is rum, so is the antiseptic. Also, the celebratory drink afterward. It's a very rum-forward procedure. As for hands, they are washed in seawater sometimes, usually when there's fish guts involved. Otherwise, you wipe them on your trousers, the mast, or whatever unlucky animal is within reach. Clean hands are not a priority. Hands are tools, and like the tools on board, they're expected to work whether or not they're covered in yesterday's stew. Let us now address the elephant in the bilge. Where, exactly, do you go when nature calls? The answer is overboard, if you're lucky. Most pirate ships are equipped with a head, a small wooden platform extending over the bow, exposed to wind, waves, and existential reflection. There is a hole, you sit on it, that's it. There's no privacy, no dignity, and a strong chance you'll fall in if the ship lurches too hard. If you're shy, tough. If you're modest, hilarious. Pirates relieve themselves in full view of the ocean and, occasionally, their shipmates. It's a bonding experience, one that involves gritted teeth, flailing for balance, and a surprising number of seabirds. Sometimes, during rough seas, the head is simply not an option. In these cases, one improvises with a bucket. The bucket is shared, the bucket has seen things. Toiletry paper? No. Leaves, rags, your shirt, if it's the end of a particularly hard voyage, or nothing at all. You adjust, you suffer, you move on. Laundry, if done at all, is done with seawater and elbow grease. Clothes are soaked, stomped on, wrung out, and left to dry on the lines that, coincidentally, are also used for ropes, drying fish, and the occasional misbehaving parrot. Salt crusts everything. Once dry, your clothes resemble brittle jerky, and putting them on is like sliding into a bag made of sharp cardboard. But they are technically clean. Technically. Now let's discuss parasites. You will have them. That's not a threat, it's a guarantee. Lice, fleas, and mites are as much a part of the crew as the quartermaster, and twice as organized. You itch. Constantly. It becomes background noise, like creaking wood or the eternal complaints of Jenkins, the sailor who still hasn't forgiven someone for stealing his spoon 3 years ago. There are no delousing protocols, save for one: fire. Every few weeks, some genius suggests burning their clothes to rid themselves of pests. They strip naked, torch their trousers, then spend the rest of the day regretting everything. It's a time-honored tradition of desperation and poor planning. Skin diseases are common. Rashes bloom like algae. Sunburns peel. Fungus grows in places you didn't know had microclimates. There's a thing they call sea rot, a kind of wet gangrene that affects toes, fingers, and morale. No one talks about it. Everyone has it. Infections? Oh yes, you get a cut, it festers. You get a blister, it fills with pus. The ship's surgeon, if you're lucky enough to have is really more of a hobbyist butcher with a bone saw and an enthusiastic approach to amputation. He has 3 jars, one for leeches, one for teeth he's removed, and one for specimens no one asks about. His bedside manner involves a lot of humming and wiping his hands on his apron. And yet, despite all of this, you press on. The smell becomes part of you. You begin to differentiate between normal pirate stink and concerning pirate stink. You grow proud of your calluses. You wear your salt-stained shirt like armor. You develop a philosophical acceptance of your own filth. Occasionally, you encounter a newer crew member who still tries to stay clean. He wipes his hands before eating. He rinses his cup. He smells faintly of lemon somehow. Everyone hates him. He is a reminder of better days, of land-based living, of the unbearable lightness of soap. He will either adapt or be tossed overboard for offending the social ecosystem. By now, your body has adjusted. Your pores exude salt. Your hair defies combs. Your feet are permanently pruny. You're less man and more brine-cured husk. But this is the price of freedom, they say, though it's worth noting that freedom often comes with trench foot. And yet, amidst the grime, there are moments brief, rare, of almost transcendental bliss. A cool breeze on a hot day, a splash of rainwater clean enough to drink, a barrel of fresh shirts looted from a merchant ship, the feeling of slipping on dry socks, even if they're someone else's. These are the things that pass for miracles at sea. So no, hygiene isn't just low on the list. It's buried beneath the bilge in a moldy crate labeled "Luxuries we abandoned long ago." But you don't need to be clean. You need to be tough, stubborn, and able to endure the kind of discomfort that would make a monk cry. Because on a pirate ship, filth is a constant. But so is the wind, the waves, and the never-ending certainty that tomorrow you'll wake up itchy, damp, and deeply grateful you haven't lost any toes yet. If the duties of dawn haven't broken your spirit, and they probably should have by now, you may begin to wonder about hygiene, cleanliness, sanitation. Concepts that, while familiar on land, become almost mythical at sea. On a 17th century pirate ship, hygiene is less a practice and more of a vague, wistful idea, like retirement, or breakfast without weevils. First, let's talk about bathing. That thing you used to do back when water came out of walls and didn't taste like rust and eels. On a pirate ship, bathing is achieved one of 3 ways: falling overboard, being caught in a rainstorm, or getting hit with someone else's bucket of rinse water. None are intentional. All are deeply disappointing. There is technically an ocean all around you. Some might say, why not bathe in that? And to that, the pirate replies, because it's freezing, filled with jellyfish, and sharks like to nibble. Also, climbing back up onto a ship after diving in is an athletic feat most pirates simply cannot achieve without assistance, ridicule, or both. So, instead, they remain salty, perpetually. Internally, spiritually, and externally. Soap exists on board, but it's a precious commodity used sparingly and hoarded with a reverence usually reserved for gold or functioning teeth. It's made from animal fat, lye, and low expectations. If you can get your hands on a lump of it, congratulations. You now possess a sticky, semi-caustic brick that smells like burnt pork and makes your skin feel like it's been insulted. Hair washing? No. The closest you come to that is standing near someone who got doused in seawater during a squall and happened to drip on you. Most pirates wear headscarves or hats, partly to keep the sun out of their eyes, but mostly to keep the grease in. It's common courtesy, really. Shaving is optional and, for most, abandoned entirely. Razors are dull, mirrors non-existent, and anyone with a sharp blade near their throat is generally presumed to be losing a fight. Beards are cultivated, not out of fashion, but inertia. Some are proud of them. Others simply forget they have one until a crewmate points out it has started collecting insects. And then there's the matter of teeth. You won't need them for long. Most pirate diets are hard enough to break a molar and soft enough to rot the rest. There is no toothbrush, no floss. Dental hygiene is performed with rum and prayer. If you have a toothache, the solution is to remove the tooth with a pair of pliers and a few sturdy mates to hold you down. Anesthesia is rum, so is the antiseptic. Also, the celebratory drink afterward. It's a very rum-forward procedure. As for hands, they are washed in seawater sometimes, usually when there's fish guts involved. Otherwise, you wipe them on your trousers, the mast, or whatever unlucky animal is within reach. Clean hands are not a priority. Hands are tools, and like the tools on board, they're expected to work whether or not they're covered in yesterday's stew. Let us now address the elephant in the bilge. Where, exactly, do you go when nature calls? The answer is overboard, if you're lucky. Most pirate ships are equipped with a head, a small wooden platform extending over the bow, exposed to wind, waves, and existential reflection. There is a hole. You sit on it. That's it. There's no privacy, no dignity, and a strong chance you'll fall in if the ship lurches too hard. If you're shy, tough. If you're modest, hilarious. Pirates relieve themselves in full view of the ocean and, occasionally, their shipmates. It's a bonding experience. One that involves gritted teeth, flailing for balance, and a surprising number of seabirds. Sometimes, during rough seas, the head is simply not an option. In these cases, one improvises with a bucket. The bucket is shared. The bucket has seen things. Toiletry paper? No. Leaves, rags, your shirt if it's the end of a particularly hard voyage, or nothing at all. You adjust, you suffer, you move on. Laundry, if done at all, is done with seawater and elbow grease. Clothes are soaked, stomped on, wrung out, and left to dry on the lines that, coincidentally, are also used for ropes, drying fish, and the occasional misbehaving parrot. Salt crusts everything. Once dry, your clothes resemble brittle jerky, and putting them on is like sliding into a bag made of sharp cardboard. But they are technically clean. Technically. Now let's discuss parasites. You will have them. That's not a threat, it's a guarantee. Lice, fleas, and mites are as much a part of the crew as the quartermaster and twice as organized. You itch. Constantly. It becomes background noise, like creaking wood or the eternal complaints of Jenkins, the sailor who still hasn't forgiven someone for stealing his spoon 3 years ago. There are no delousing protocols, save for one: fire. Every few weeks, some genius suggests burning their clothes to rid themselves of pests. They strip naked, torch their trousers, then spend the rest of the day regretting everything. It's a time-honored tradition of desperation and poor planning. Skin diseases are common. Rashes bloom like algae, sunburns peel. Fungus grows in places you didn't know had microclimates. There's a thing they call sea rot, a kind of wet gangrene that affects toes, fingers, and morale. No one talks about it. Everyone has it. Infections? Oh yes, you get a cut, it festers. You get a blister, it fills with pus. The ship's surgeon, if you're lucky enough to have Arnie's, really more of a hobbyist butcher with a bone saw and an enthusiastic approach to amputation. He has 3 jars, one for leeches, one for teeth he's removed, and one for specimens no one asks about. His bedside manner involves a lot of humming and wiping his hands on his apron. And yet, despite all of this, you press on. The smell becomes part of you. You begin to differentiate between normal pirate stink and concerning pirate stink. You grow proud of your calluses. You wear your salt-stained shirt like armor. You develop a philosophical acceptance of your own filth. Occasionally, you encounter a newer crew member who still tries to stay clean. He wipes his hands before eating. He rinses his cup. He smells faintly of lemon somehow. Everyone hates him. He is a reminder of better days, of land-based living, of the unbearable lightness of soap. He will either adapt or be tossed overboard for offending the social ecosystem. By now, your body has adjusted. Your pores exude salt. Your hair defies combs. Your feet are permanently pruny. You're less man and more brine-cured husk. But this is the price of freedom, they say, though it's worth noting that freedom often comes with trench foot. And yet, amidst the grime, there are moments brief, rare, of almost transcendental bliss. A cool breeze on a hot day, a splash of rainwater clean enough to drink, a barrel of fresh shirts looted from a merchant ship, the feeling of slipping on dry socks, even if they're someone else's. These are the things that pass for miracles at sea. So no, hygiene isn't just low on the list. It's buried beneath the bilge in a moldy crate labeled luxuries we abandoned long ago. But you don't need to be clean. You need to be tough, stubborn, and able to endure the kind of discomfort that would make a monk cry. Because on a pirate ship, filth is a constant. But so is the wind, the waves, and the never-ending certainty that tomorrow you'll wake up itchy, damp, and deeply grateful you haven't lost any toes yet. By now, you've abandoned any remaining illusion that life aboard a pirate ship involves adventure, excitement, or even basic chronological consistency. What you experience instead is the eternal cycle known as the watch system, an endless relay race of exhaustion where the baton is a splintered mop and the reward is more work. Time aboard a pirate ship is divided not by clocks, but by bells and groans. There are no calendars, no weekends, no days off. There is only the watcher name that sounds ominous and, frankly, lives up to it. The crew is split into groups, known as watches, to ensure the ship functions at all hours. This might sound efficient, and it is, in the same way that a hamster wheel is efficient. Each watch lasts 4 hours. There are 6 watches in a full day. That's 24 hours of constant labor, where someone is always doing something, somewhere, while you're trying to nap on a rope coil and forget you have bones. Your personal time schedule now reads something like this. Midnight to 4 a.m., watch. 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., not watch, but probably swabbing. 8 a.m. to noon, watch again. Noon to 4 p.m., eat something resembling food. 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., climb rigging and wish for death. 8 p.m. to midnight, contemplate life choices in darkness. Then it repeats, forever. This rotation is known affectionately as the dog watch. It's called that not because dogs are involved, but because it's miserable. And calling it the soul-crushing monotony shift was apparently too long to yell during storms. The idea is to rotate the men so no one suffers the exact same hours each day. In theory, it keeps you from going insane. In practice, it distributes insanity evenly. Being on watch doesn't mean you get to do something exciting, like look for treasure or swing from ropes dramatically. It means you're on deck, doing whatever needs doing, which is usually one of the following: checking for leaks, adjusting sails, readjusting sails, untangling ropes you personally did not tangle but are now responsible for, staring into the endless void of sea and sky, trying to decide if that speck on the horizon is another ship or just the universe, toying with your hopes again. If you're the unlucky soul assigned to lookout duty, congratulations. You're now climbing to the crow's nest, which sounds romantic but is essentially a barrel nailed to a mast. Up there, you sway with the ship's every movement, exposed to sun, wind, and the haunting knowledge that birds don't respect personal space. Your job? To watch. For what? Anything. Ships, storms, sea monsters, hallucinations brought on by salted fish and dehydration. You shout down what you see. Usually, it's nothing. Occasionally, it's more nothing. Once, it was a turtle. The crew still talks about the turtle. It was the most excitement they'd had in weeks. Meanwhile, on deck, the rest of the watch performs its sacred duties, maintaining the sails, manning the helm, checking the compass, which no one really understands, and yelling things at each other that sound nautical but may just be improvised. "Slack the jib," someone cries. "Brace the yard," another replies. "Feed the ferret," you add, hoping no one notices you've never actually learned the terms. At night, things get even more enchanting. The darkness descends like a wet blanket made of ink and despair. The lanterns flicker weakly, their light devoured by fog and salt spray. Every shadow could be danger. Or Jenkins, still looking for his spoon. The night watch is a strange thing. You're half awake, half dreaming, fully annoyed. The stars above are dazzling, if you can look up long enough without tripping over a rope or slipping in eel juice. Some men take solace in the celestial spectacle. Others just mutter at the sky like it's personally responsible for their bad knees. During your off-watch hours, you might think you're supposed to rest. That's adorable. Instead, you're expected to fix things. Mend sails, clean weapons, sharpen blades that haven't cut anything but bread in months. One particularly philosophical pirate insists that dulling his cutlass is a form of protest against violence. Everyone else just thinks he's lazy. There is, of course, the occasional reprieve. A quiet hour where the wind is calm, the seas are gentle, and no one's actively bleeding. In these rare moments, a pirate might sit and carve something out of wood, a small figurine, a pipe stem, or a likeness of someone he claims is his lady back home, but suspiciously resembles the captain. No one questions it, out loud. These peaceful interludes are not to be trusted, because the rhythm of the watch is a lie. It gives you just enough repetition to feel stable, then throws a storm at you like a watery brick. Storms, it should be noted, do not respect watches. They arrive unannounced, uninvited, and always during your shift. Suddenly, the ship lurches like it's auditioning for a disaster opera. The sails whip violently. The deck becomes a slip and slide of rain, vomit, and existential panic. Orders are shouted, men scramble, someone is still singing for reasons unclear. During storms, there is no schedule. Everyone is on duty. You pull ropes, tie knots, bail water, and try to ignore the very real possibility that your next job might involve swimming involuntarily. Then the storm ends, and the cycle resumes. Watches reset. The deck is swabbed anew. The men return to their rotations, slightly more broken but still functional, like the ship itself. Sleep, when you get it, is shallow and suspicious. You curl up in your hammock, hoping not to be awakened by shouting cannon fire or the creeping certainty that you forgot to tie something important. You drift off to the lullaby of creaking timbers and muffled curses. If you're lucky, you dream of dirt, of being on solid ground, of never hearing the word brace again. In time, the rhythm of the watch seeps into your bones. Your body begins to anticipate the bells. You wake moments before your shift. You instinctively duck when Jenkins walks by with a bucket. You know by smell alone whether it's 4 a.m. or 4 p.m. This is your life now, measured in 4-hour chunks, marked by sails, ropes, wind, and shouting. There is no escape, only rotation. You are both cog and wheel in this splintered machine drifting across an uncaring ocean. Next, we'll explore the fascinating variety of jobs aboard the pirate ship. From cook to carpenter, from surgeon to gunner, each role is vital, unpleasant, and mildly dangerous. Some involve knives. Others involve boiling things. A few involve both. And none involve retirement benefits. After enough time on a pirate ship, the hierarchy becomes clear not through charts or paperwork, but through who gets yelled at the most and who gets to do the yelling. Despite the image of pirates as anarchic, freedom-loving rogues, the truth is that a ship requires structure to stay afloat both literally and socially. It's a miracle of rope, labor, and reluctant cooperation. There are jobs on board, many jobs. Almost none of them are desirable, but someone must do them, and on a pirate ship, someone usually means you. Let's start at the top. The captain. Ah yes, the captain. Wears the fanciest hat, says things like "I" and "bring me the chart," and occasionally does actual work. The captain is not a king. He can be voted out, punched out, or tossed overboard if morale dips too low. His authority stems less from divine right and more from an unspoken agreement. He yells well, knows where to go, and has stabbed fewer crew members than average. His main responsibilities include making decisions, drinking rum with a furrowed brow, and occasionally pointing dramatically at things on the horizon. He is respected, feared, and gossiped about constantly. The quartermaster, second in command, and significantly more feared than the captain. The quartermaster handles discipline, distributes loot, and mediates disputes. Think of him as the ship's accountant, sheriff, and customer complaints desk all rolled into one, armed with a pistol. He's in charge of the supplies, who gets food, who gets rope, who gets flogged. In many ways, he's the reason the crew hasn't imploded in a violent mutiny. In other ways, he's the reason people keep considering it. The boatswain, or bosun. This is the one who does all the yelling. The bosun oversees the deck crew, ensures the rigging's in order, the sails are set, and the general sense of nautical panic remains at an acceptable level. His voice is the first thing you hear in the morning, and the last thing you curse before sleep. He is not known for patience. He measures your worth in knots tied, decks swabbed, and how quickly you move when screamed at. The gunner. This man knows things about gunpowder no one else wants to know. He handles the cannons, maintaining them, aiming them, and making sure they don't explode in everyone's faces. The gunner is always slightly sooty, slightly deaf, and entirely unconcerned with your safety. He keeps a private stash of wicks, tools, and grudges. His cannon crew are usually the most singed, most scarred, and most proud members of the ship. They bond through concussions and yelling. The carpenter, the unsung hero of the vessel. The carpenter repairs the ship-hatching holes, replacing planks, reinforcing the hull after the last ill-advised encounter with rocks. He is part builder, part miracle worker, and part grumbling forest troll. He walks the deck with a bag of tools that make loud, clanking noises designed to remind everyone that without him, this ship is just driftwood with ambition. The surgeon. Using the term doctor here is generous. This individual may or may not have formal training. More likely he has a saw, a bottle of alcohol, and a book he once skimmed about anatomy. He specializes in amputation, leech application, and guessing. The surgeon's quarters smell strongly of rum and despair. His instruments are sterilized through the ancient technique of wiping them on something vaguely clean. Despite this, the crew respects him mostly because he's the only person on board who knows which end of the intestine is supposed to be inside. The cook. Every pirate ship needs someone willing to touch raw meat and look unbothered by mold. The cook fits this role admirably. His galley is a steamy den of boiling pots, old fish, and mystery ingredients. He can make a meal out of anything: salted pork, biscuit crumbs, seaweed, and hope. His meals are often described as not actively poisonous, which is high praise. He's also responsible for rationing out food and water, meaning he wields more quiet power than most realize. Annoy him, and your biscuit gets forgotten. Twice. The sailmaker. This is the quiet one, hunched over canvas like a monk with thread. The sailmaker repairs the sails constantly because they tear constantly. Storms, cannonballs, or Jenkins climbing where he shouldn't, it's all just one big, flapping chore. His fingers are a mass of calluses. He communicates mostly in grunts. Occasionally, he yells at the wind. We all have our coping mechanisms. The powder monkey. These are the young boys or very unfortunate grown men assigned to ferry gunpowder during battles. Their job is to carry small barrels of highly explosive material across a slippery deck in the middle of chaos while being shot at. It's a good position if you're looking to build character, or if you have a death wish. Most powder monkeys end up with hearing loss, burn scars, or the nickname Boomy. The cabin boy. Usually the youngest and least respected crew member. He does whatever no one else wants to: cleaning the captain's boots, delivering messages, fetching buckets, and getting blamed for things he definitely didn't do. He is everyone's servant, everyone's scapegoat, and occasionally a spy. The only upside is that he sleeps slightly closer to the captain's cabin, which means fewer rats. Slightly fewer. The ordinary seaman. This is you. Welcome. You tie ropes. You haul lines. You scrape barnacles off the hull and complain about everything while doing it. You are the backbone of the ship, and also the part that everyone steps on. Your job changes daily and depends on how loud you snore, how recently you annoyed the quartermaster, and whether you accidentally looked useful during roll call. You're paid in shares of loot, bruises, and a vague sense of purpose. You're replaceable. You're overworked. And you're just competent enough to not be thrown overboard today. The musicians. Some ships carried fiddlers, drummers, or pipers to boost morale. These individuals are tolerated so long as they remember when to stop. The first time someone plays Greensleeves during a storm, they find themselves intimately acquainted with the sea. Still, a good shanty can raise spirits, if only because it distracts from the constant smell of wet rope and worse decisions. Together, this crew functions like a disjointed, ill-tempered machine. Each person fills a role, whether by choice or by accident. The ship moves, creaks, fights, and survives because these men and boys, experts and amateurs alike, perform their duties with grim consistency and occasional enthusiasm. There are no promotions. No gold stars, no Employee of the Month plaque. Just a steady grind of tasks, shouted orders, and the unspoken agreement that you'll all keep going until the ship sinks, you get rich, or both. Next, we explore the fine dining of the high seas. Spoiler, it's not fine, it's not dining, and you'll never look at a biscuit the same way again. After learning your role aboard a pirate ship, and discovering that all of them involve rope burns, verbal abuse, and occasional cannon proximity. You might find yourself wondering, what exactly keeps this ship of misery running? What fuels these grumbling, sunburned men as they shout orders and sling buckets of fish guts? The answer, technically, is food, though referring to it as such may be an overstatement. Let us begin with hardtack, a word that sounds vaguely violent and appropriately so. Hardtack is a biscuit, if a brick could be a biscuit, made of flour and water, baked until it resembles drywall, and then left to harden into something you could probably use to patch the hull. It is the foundational food of the sea. It has the flavor of punishment and the texture of roofing tile. It can be soaked in rum to soften it. It usually isn't. Hardtack is so unyielding that biting into it has been known to dislodge molars. Many pirates wisely choose to hammer it into pieces first. Those who don't are either already missing teeth or too proud to admit defeat. The best thing about hardtack is that it keeps forever, which is also the worst thing about it. It never goes bad, it just gets worse. After a few weeks in the hold, it becomes a sort of communal ecosystem for weevils. Weevils, if you're unfamiliar, are tiny beetles that adore flour. They will live, thrive, and eventually die in your hardtack. Pirates didn't usually bother removing them. Some would tap the biscuit on the table to shake the bugs out. Others didn't care. Protein is protein, and a little extra crunch was the least of their problems. Next on the menu is salted meat. Not fresh meat, not cooked meat, salted meat. It could be beef, pork, or something unidentifiable that was definitely breathing at some point. The preservation method is simple. Coat it in so much salt that no bacteria hope can survive. The result is a lump of gristle that smells like the ocean and tastes like revenge. Before consumption, salted meat is boiled, sometimes for hours. The resulting stew is gray, stringy, and depressingly consistent. It doesn't matter what meat it started as. After boiling, it all becomes the same, vaguely sinewy and questionably edible. The cooking water is often reused, creating a soup that's rich in flavor and trauma. The more times it's reused, the more it tastes like desperation. Occasionally, if the ship had decent stores, you might be treated to dried peas. These must be boiled for so long that they resemble a substance almost entirely unlike peas. The flavor is bland but harmless, which is considered a delicacy in pirate cuisine. They also serve the vital nutritional purpose of being something not made of salt, bugs, or congealed lard. There's also ship's biscuit, which differs from hardtack in name only. It's the same miserable food item, sometimes accidentally rebranded to convince you it's a different meal. This is a common psychological tactic aboard ships. Pretend you're eating something new, when in fact, it's the same beige square you've been gnawing on for weeks. Optimism is a seasoning of its own. Cheese may be found in the stores as well, though by the time it reaches your hands, it's not so much cheese as a soft, resentful organism. The smell precedes it by several feet. It may have once been cheddar. It is now a bold experiment in fungal ambition. Still, it spreads nicely on hardtack, assuming you have a knife sharp enough to cut the cheese and dull enough not to inflict self-harm immediately after. And then there's the beverage situation. Fresh water on a ship is a tricky thing. You start out with barrels of it, clean and sweet. After a few days, it becomes cloudy. After a few weeks, it tastes like wood, mold, and whatever unfortunate rat drowned in it. To prevent illness, at least distract from it, the pirates mixed it with alcohol. Enter small beer and grog. Small beer is barely alcoholic, often lukewarm, and mostly inoffensive. It's made with low malt content and consumed like water. It's safer than actual water, but only slightly more enjoyable. Think of it as mildly flavored sadness. Grog, on the other hand, is the classic pirate drink, a mix of water, rum, and lime juice. The lime was to prevent scurvy. The rum was to make you forget about the lime. Grog was served daily, often diluted, and doled out with military efficiency. Drinking grog was a ritual, a moment of collective acceptance that no one was going to feel good today, but at least they could feel differently bad. Scurvy, by the way, was a constant threat. Caused by a lack of vitamin C, it manifested in bleeding gums, loose teeth, bruising, and the kind of general malaise usually reserved for tragic poets. The best prevention? Citrus, which, unfortunately, does not grow on ships. When citrus was available, it was hoarded like treasure. Lemons, limes, even oranges fruit was consumed with the wide-eyed reverence of a man discovering fire. If a pirate had a lemon, he wasn't sharing. If he shared, he had plans to steal your boots later. In truly desperate times when the stores ran dry, the weather was bad, and morale was underwater, the diet entered a realm known as improvised. This might include boiled leather, cut from shoes, soaked and eaten like gum. Rat stew, self-explanatory, sometimes enhanced with onions if someone had an onion and a death wish. Moss barnacles and anything not nailed down. There are records of men eating candles, parchment, and in at least one horrifying instance, each other. These are extreme cases, of course, but they underline the central truth of pirate cuisine. It is not about pleasure, it is about survival, and sometimes not even that. Food was rationed by the quartermaster, who decided what was given out and when. He was not known for generosity. If you were on good terms, you might get a slightly less offensive biscuit. If not, you were eating the mystery bucket. Mealtimes were short, informal, and often quiet. There's not much to say when chewing on a bone that might be pork and might be the ship's mascot. Still, it was a break from worker time to sit, scowl, and reconsider your life choices. Utensils, optional. Most pirates ate with their hands. Knives were used only if absolutely necessary and preferably not shared. The communal bowl was common. Individual plates were a rare luxury. Hygiene, as previously discussed, played no role here. If someone sneezed into the stew, that was just extra flavor. The cook, despite being the architect of this digestive tragedy, was not blamed. He was seen more as a translator, converting questionable ingredients into something vaguely chewable. Complaining was allowed within reason. Openly criticizing the cook might result in you being volunteered for galley duty, which involved peeling things that didn't want to be peeled and stirring pots that occasionally stirred back. And yet, despite everything, the insects, the salt, the existential questions raised by each bowl, pirates ate. They drank, and they survived. Some even grew fond of the food, or at least convinced themselves they had, because accepting it was easier than crying into your grog. In the end, the pirate's diet was a reflection of life at sea, repetitive, gritty, and just dangerous enough to keep things interesting. It nourished the body in the most reluctant way possible, like a dog begrudgingly handing over a bone, but it kept men upright, angry, and alive just barely. Next, we'll examine what happens in the lulls between meals and madness, the calm between storms, the social ecosystem of sea creatures in human form. Yes, it's time to discuss what pirates did when they weren't shouting, fighting, or eating what may have been rope soup. If the food hasn't broken your spirit, and the watch schedule hasn't dissolved your will to live into a salty paste, then congratulations, you've made it to the part of pirate life that truly tests your resolve. The weather. For most people, weather is an inconvenience. Rain spoils a picnic, wind messes up a hairstyle, snow delays a train. But at sea, weather is an existential threat that arrives without warning, lingers for hours or days, and then vanishes just long enough to let you start pretending life might be normal again. On a 17th century pirate ship, there is no indoors to retreat to. The ship is your home, workplace, bathroom, and lunchroom, all exposed to the whims of the elements. Your only protection is the occasional tarp, the occasional coat, and the deeply flawed belief that if you just huddle hard enough, the wind will go away. Start with sun. Sounds pleasant, doesn't it? You may be imagining golden light sparkling on the water, tan lines and warm breezes. But sun on a pirate ship is not kind. It is a relentless, punishing fireball that transforms the deck into a splintered griddle and your scalp into a blistered wasteland. There are no sunglasses. There is no SPF anything. The only hat you own is made of wool, because your last one was taken by a gull. You squint constantly, and the squint becomes permanent. Your lips crack, your skin peels, and your shirt begins to smell like roasted sailor. The water in the barrels grows warm. The grog becomes less refreshing and more fermented soup. Still, you carry on, you swab, you climb rigging, you pretend the heat stroke is just enthusiasm. Then there is rain, the most democratic of maritime weather conditions. It doesn't matter where you stand, it doesn't matter who you are. Rain hits everyone, all the time, with a passion usually reserved for angry poets. It seeps into your clothes, your boots, your dreams. Rain on a pirate ship isn't just wet, it's aggressive. The deck becomes a slip hazard, and every movement is a test of your reflexes and your desire not to die today. Buckets appear from nowhere. Someone is always bailing. The sails sag, ropes swell, and everything smells like mildew and disappointment. And of course, just when you think it can't get wetter, it does, because the storm arrives. Storms at sea are not like the ones on land. On land, you can sit inside, sip tea, and say things like, "Ooh, thunder." At sea, thunder means you're about to be slapped in the face by nature. The sky turns the color of regret. The wind howls like it's been wronged. The sea heaves and bucks like an insulted mule. And your job, against all odds, is to keep the ship from falling apart. Everyone becomes alert, grim, and wet. Orders are screamed, men scramble. You're told to reef the sails, which means climbing into a rigging system designed by madmen and tightening a sail that is actively trying to murder you. The rain pelts you sideways. Your fingers go numb. You briefly consider whether your soul is waterproof. Down below, the carpenter is already checking the hull for leaks. The gunner is strapping down the cannons so they don't turn into rolling death barrels. The cook ties a lid on the stew pot, not because anyone's hungry, but because the stew is known to climb out and seek freedom during storms. Meanwhile, the ship lurches. You lurch. Everything lurches. You lose your footing, your balance, and possibly your dignity. Someone is thrown across the deck, slides into the mizzenmast, and just lies there for a while, rethinking their career path. If the lightning strikes nearby, it's loud enough to make your ears ring for the rest of the week. If it strikes the ship, everyone pauses, makes peace with their deity of choice, and resumes panicking. In the midst of all this chaos, the captain stands at the helm, soaked, shouting orders, and grinning like a lunatic. He lives for this. You suspect he may be the reason the storm started in the first place. After hours of rain, wind, and existential dread, the storm finally begins to fade. The clouds break. The sun returns, smugly. The ocean calms, though not enough to feel safe. You are soaked to the marrow. You are bruised, exhausted, and covered in rope burns. But the ship is intact, mostly. The aftermath is always the same: repair, recover, regret. You untangle rigging, patch sails, mop the deck again for no reason other than habit. The carpenter mutters about wood rot. The surgeon tends to bruises and dislocated joints with all the compassion of a man applying duct tape to a cracked wall. The cook boils water that smells faintly of mold and declares it tea. Then comes fog, the most passive-aggressive weather of them all. It rolls in silently, blurring the horizon, turning the world into a damp sketch. You can't see more than a few feet ahead. Sounds become eerie. Voices echo strangely. Everyone speaks in whispers, as though being too loud might summon something from the mist. Fog is not dangerous, technically, but it feels dangerous, which is worse. You walk more carefully. You tie your knots with an extra twist. You listen harder. You begin to suspect Jenkins has been replaced by a fog elemental. He hasn't. He's just pale and miserable. Then there's cold. Cold is the slow killer. The wind bites. The rain freezes. Your hands lose dexterity. Your nose runs like it's being chased. The ship becomes an ice rink made of oak and doom. You sleep in layers. You wake up colder. You try to warm your hands on the lantern and burn your fingers. Again. Frost collects on the ropes. The sails stiffen. You can see your breath. You wish you couldn't, because it just reminds you that you're alive, which seems like a lot of effort right now. And in case you were wondering, yes, pirates sailed through all of this. Not by choice, of course, but the sea doesn't offer sick days. No matter the weather, there are sails to trim, decks to scrub, and barrels to secure. The work doesn't stop. You just do it colder, wetter, or with a higher chance of being electrocuted. Still, there are moments brief and strangely tender when the elements surprise you. A sunrise that sets the sea ablaze with color. A calm stretch of ocean so still it mirrors the sky. A rainbow after a storm, even if it's arcing over a half-sunk merchant ship. In those rare pauses between extremes, the world feels less like a death trap and more like a strange, beautiful mistake. You lean on the rail, you breathe in the salt, you wonder how you ended up here. And then Jenkins spills the slop bucket again, and the moment is gone. Weather on a pirate ship is not just background noise. It is a cruel, moody presence that shapes every hour of your life. It doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if your clothes are wet or if you've lost 3 fingers to frostbite. It simply is, and it demands your respect, your labor, and occasionally your socks. So, you adapt. You grow hardier. You squint more. You learn to tell the weather by smell, by feel, by the way the sails twitch in the wind. You sleep through gales. You eat through sleet. You swab through drizzle. And when the next storm comes, as it always does, you brace your feet, grit your teeth, and get back to work. Next, we explore the only thing more volatile than the weather, the people. Specifically, what happens when dozens of irritable men live in close quarters for months on end. Spoiler, they don't always get along. After surviving the latest atmospheric assault, there's a brief and almost peaceful lull aboard the ship. The wind dies down. The waves soften. For a moment, the sea forgets to be hostile. This is when the crew gets bored. And when pirates get bored, they get creative. And by creative, I mean violent. Welcome to the complex, volatile world of pirate social life, where camaraderie and conflict share a hammock and take turns throwing punches. During quieter hours between scrubbing barnacles, dodging lightning, and eating biscuits with insect-topping spirits, occasionally attempt something resembling human connection. The results are mixed. Conversations drift across the deck like bad smells. They range from tall tales of women who definitely existed, to exaggerations about plunder that absolutely didn't happen, to heated debates over whether Jenkins actually saw a sea serpent or just misidentified a fat eel. Friendships do exist. Sort of. They are built on shared near-death experiences, mutual distrust of the quartermaster, and a deep, unspoken understanding that you will not steal each other's rations, boots, or grog without fair warning. Games are played. Dice are common carved from bone, wood, or anything that can roll and generate suspicion. The rules vary wildly and often involve shouting, accusations of cheating, and, occasionally, small knives. Gambling is less a pastime and more a slow-motion explosion. 1 minute, they're betting buttons. The next, someone is challenging someone else to a duel over who actually won a round of Ship Rat Sevens, a game no one actually understands. There are also card games, most of which are invented on the spot. The only consistent rule is that someone will lose and someone else will smirk like they planned it. If the captain walks by and joins in, the game ends, either because he wins instantly or because everyone panics and pretends to be swabbing something. Then there are shanties. Singing is a vital part of pirate morale, and also a convenient way to shout without being accused of insubordination. Sea shanties are rhythmic, bawdy, and designed to distract from physical pain and emotional rot. They often include references to women, rum, fish, more rum, and Jenkins' mysterious rash. Everyone knows the lyrics. If they don't, they hum along and pretend. Some pirates sing enthusiastically, belting out verses as if trying to summon a mermaid. Others mumble the words with the enthusiasm of a man peeling potatoes. Either way, the noise fills the ship, briefly pushing away the silence of the sea. Music, surprisingly, isn't limited to singing. If the ship is lucky, there's a fiddler or a flautist on board, someone who can produce a tune without injuring anyone. The rest of the crew bangs on crates, stomps their boots, or plays spoons with the manic joy of men who haven't seen a tree in 2 months. Then, just as the mood begins to resemble something faintly cheerful, someone gets punched in the face. Because pirates, while capable of merriment, are also made of tension, salt, and extremely poor impulse control. Every crew is a boiling pot of tempers, egos, and grudges. Stir it too much, and it spills. Fights on a pirate ship are frequent, casual, and mostly tolerated up to a point. Disagreements start over anything: a stolen biscuit, a botched rope knot, a perceived glance in the wrong direction. Sometimes the cause isn't even remembered by the time fists start flying. Most altercations are short and ugly. A few punches, some grappling, a shout or two. Someone gets shoved into a barrel. Someone else loses a hat. Onlookers cheer, jeer, or place bets. The quartermaster breaks it up if it looks like permanent damage might occur. If not, he lets it play out, preferably with minimal blood on the deck. Weapons are generally discouraged in these scuffles, not because of principle but because stabbing a crewmate makes for bad logistics. One fewer man to haul rope, one more ghost to haunt the crow's nest. However, exceptions occur. If someone draws steel, the fight escalates from entertainment to judicial matter. That's where pirate justice steps in. Despite their lawless reputation, pirates operated under surprisingly democratic codes. Ship articles were agreed upon before voyages, rules covering loot, duties, punishments, and yes, personal conduct. They were usually simple, direct, and written in a tone that implied, or else. Break those rules, and punishment could be swift. For minor offenses, gambling debts, excessive laziness, punching someone during lunch, you might get flogged. Not just a dramatic naval tradition, but a deeply motivational one. The boatswain would deliver lashes with a catto, 9 tails, while the crew watched with varying degrees of sympathy, amusement, and polite indifference. More serious crimes: mutiny, theft from the crew, unnecessary murder called for stronger measures. Marooning was one such solution. You would be deposited on a desolate island with a bottle of rum, a pistol with 1 shot, and a lot of time to reflect on your life choices. It was both punishment and spectacle, and often served as a cautionary tale for other crew members who were thinking too independently. And then there was walking the plank, which, historically, was rare but theatrically effective. Pirates preferred more practical punishments, but the occasional theatrical execution wasn't out of the question, especially if it made the point stick. That said, not all fights ended in punishment. Some were settled with a duel knot, the pistols at 10 paces variety, but the grab 2 cutlasses and try not to lose an ear variety. These duels had no official sanction, but as long as both parties survived and the deck wasn't on fire afterward, the captain often turned a blind eye. Sometimes, the crew itself voted on disputes. Pirates prided themselves on their democracy, at least when it was convenient. You could call for a vote if you felt wronged. You could argue your case in front of your peers, many of whom were chewing something unidentifiable and paying partial attention. Justice was not always swift, but it was usually loud. And yet, despite all the brawling and casual bloodletting, there was a strange, rough camaraderie. Pirates understood each other in a way only people trapped in a floating wooden prison can. They shared food, stories, lice, and grudging respect. There were prank-harmless ones, like putting seaweed in someone's boots, and less harmless ones, like convincing the new guy the ship was haunted by a former parrot. There were traditions like naming the rats, or throwing a shoe overboard to appease the sea witch. No one believed in the sea witch, but better safe than soggy. Evenings, when calm, became communal affairs. The day's tensions melted under a hazy mix of exhaustion and alcohol. Men leaned on rails, stared at stars, and quietly passed flasks while pretending they didn't enjoy the company. Someone would play a sad tune, someone else would ruin it with a joke, and in those moments, they weren't pirates, they were just tired men who had made strange life choices and were trying to survive them together. Because social life aboard a pirate ship was like the ship itself, loud, unpredictable, and patched together with old rope and mutual toleration. You didn't have to like your crewmates. You just had to trust them enough not to toss you overboard in your sleep. Next, we explore one of the crew's most cherished and feared traditions, the drinking of rum, the blur of discipline, and the delicate line between celebration and court-martial. If the sun hasn't fried your skin, and the social squabbles haven't fractured your skull, then congratulations once more. You've reached the third and final cornerstone of pirate shipboard life, rum the lifeblood of maritime morale and discipline, the slightly more sober consequence of enjoying that lifeblood too enthusiastically. Let's start with the rum, because on a pirate ship, it always starts with the rum. Rum is not just a beverage, it is a state of mind, a coping mechanism, a breakfast, occasionally a lunch, often a form of dental anesthetic. It is the only part of the pirate diet that is actively looked forward to. The daily rum ration, or tot, was usually diluted with water to form grog. This was done for two reasons. First, to make the supply last longer, and second, because undiluted rum has a habit of setting things on fire, including tempers and the occasional mustache. The grog was handed out in the afternoon, or morale hour, as it might generously be called. The men would line up with their tin cups, mumbling obscenities or off-key songs, and receive their lifeline of tepid, semi-alcoholic warmth. It was served with all the ceremony of slopping out pig feed, but with significantly more enthusiasm from the recipients. Of course, not everyone sipped responsibly. There were always a few who hoarded, bartered, or downed their ration so quickly that it barely touched the sides of their throat. These men would then proceed to slur sea shanties, challenge barrels to duels, and occasionally try to climb the mast upside down to impress a passing cloud. Which brings us to the inevitable conclusion of rum: discipline. Pirate life was famously free, but only up to the point where your behavior threatened to get someone killed. Drunken singing was fine, drunken steering, less so, drunken cannon discharge. That was where the line was not just crossed, but danced on, and then buried under several feet of regret. The enforcement of discipline fell to the quartermaster, who had all the warmth and charm of a particularly sarcastic guillotine. His tools of choice included threats, fines, withheld rations, and, when all else failed, flogging. Flogging was a popular method of correction, primarily because it was dramatic, memorable, and didn't require a burial afterward usually. The cat-o'-nine-tails was the traditional instrument, a whip with 9 knotted cords, each knot lovingly infused with spite and perhaps a dash of gravel. The number of lashes varied depending on the offense, the quartermaster's mood, and how recently Jenkins had insulted his boots. Minor infractions like talking back, shirking duties, or falling asleep on watch might earn a half dozen lashes. More serious issues like theft, insubordination, or impersonating the captain's parrot could result in 20 or more. The recipient was tied to the mast or grating, back bared, pride already in tatters. Watching a flogging was part of the punishment. Everyone was expected to gather, watch, and remember. This could be you. The atmosphere was less somber reflection and more awkward office party. Some watched with grim faces, others pretended to be elsewhere mentally. One man always tried to hum sea shanties softly, which was neither helpful nor appreciated. If a crew member was truly out of line, they might be put in irons, a form of restraint that doubled as an early prototype for orthopedic torture. Shackles, manacles, and the occasional barrel served as temporary holding cells. The punishment wasn't the confinement, it was the company, usually a bucket, a rat, and your own thoughts. More creative punishments also existed. For instance, keel howlinga, charming activity where a man was tied to a rope, thrown overboard, and dragged beneath the hull. Ostensibly, this was to scare the barnacles off him. In practice, it scraped the skin off with barnacles, salt, and a sense of betrayal. It wasn't used often, it was time-consuming, lethal, and got algae in the ropes, but the threat was always nearby. Then there was marooning, the pirate version of being sent to your room. If you truly made a mess of things, mutiny, treason, or spilling all the rum, you might be left on an uninhabited island with a bottle, a pistol, and whatever unresolved guilt you had time to ponder. It was a slow-motion execution with the added twist of existential dread and sand in your underpants. But not all discipline was violent. Some captains preferred more inventive measures. Public humiliation, for example. Making the offender wear a sign reading "bilge rat" or "idiot swabber," forcing them to clean the latrine area with a toothbrush, which they were not provided. Relegating them to galley duty, where they were instructed to make soup out of things that refused to be soup. And yet, somehow, through this stew of rum and retribution, the ship continued to function, because pirates, for all their bluster, understood the value of balance. You needed the grog to survive the monotony, and you needed the quartermaster to prevent the grog from turning every meal into a riot. There were even rules about how and when you could drink. You couldn't be drunk on watch. You couldn't be drunk during a raid. You certainly couldn't be drunk while loading gunpowder unless, of course, it helped steady your nerves. In which case, the rules were bent slightly until someone exploded. Most pirates walked a delicate line, just sober enough to tie knots, just drunk enough to find meaning in clouds. And if someone tipped too far over that line, well, there was always the mast, the whip, or the beach. Surprisingly, pirates also knew the value of mercy. If a crewmate had simply had a bad day, burnt by the sun, bitten by a rat, dumped by a passing mermaid, the captain or quartermaster might let a minor offense slide. A good crew was hard to find. And a crew that hadn't stabbed each other lately was worth preserving. Over time, a strange rhythm formed. Drink, fight, work, punish, repeat. It was a crude ballet of chaos, governed by unwritten laws and deeply personal vendettas. You learned to laugh at the absurdity. You learned to duck when Jenkins started singing. You learned, most importantly, when to shut up and sip your grog before someone decided to discipline you with a barrel of pickled eggs. Despite the grimness of it all, the pirates endured, because rum took the edge off. Discipline sharpened it again, and together they created a blade just dull enough not to kill anyone on purpose. Next, we turn from routine madness to organized mayhem. That's right, it's time to raid something. Let's explore the adrenaline-soaked chaos of spotting a ship, preparing for battle, and trying very hard not to be shot out of a cannon. You've eaten the salted meat. You've endured the watch system. You've been yelled at, rained on, possibly flogged, and definitely underpaid. By now, you may be wondering, when do we actually do something piratey? Like, plundering? Welcome to the hunt. This is the part of piracy that most people imagine when they hear the word pirate. The thrill of the chase, the scent of danger, the cannon smoke curling through the air. But before you polish your cutlass and start practicing your menacing sneer in the reflection of a spoon, you must first face the reality of step one, waiting. A lot of it. The hunt begins with spotting a ship. That sounds straightforward, but it isn't. The ocean is enormous, and merchant ships are, regrettably, not inclined to announce their positions with flares and a handy schedule. So you scan the horizon, every day, for hours. You do this until your eyes blur and every wave starts looking like a mast. Then, one day, a shout erupts from the crow's nest, "Sail ho!" It's Jenkins again. Everyone braces for disappointment. Is it a cloud, a whale, a smudge on his glasses? No, it's real this time. The crew surges into action. The mood on deck shifts palpably from existential loafing to murderous enthusiasm. The sails are trimmed, the course is set. The wind is checked, cursed, negotiated with. The captain appears on deck looking more alert than usual, possibly because someone slipped extra grog in his mug last night. Now, not every ship is worth chasing. The quartermaster squints through a spyglass and makes an immediate judgment based on highly advanced nautical intelligence, which mostly consists of how fat the ship looks, how panicked the crew appears, how many cannons it has pointed at us. If it's a fat merchantman, likely carrying spices, gold, or biscuits without weevils, the answer is yes, we're going for it. If it's a heavily armed naval vessel, the answer is also yes, but, said with the same tone one uses before a pub brawl, you know you're going to lose. Assuming the prey looks promising, the chase begins. This is a delicate art, because you need to be faster, but not too fast. Ideally, you want to appear distant and non-threatening like a friendly cloud with a flag. You don't want the target to realize they're being hunted until it's too late. This involves clever sail work, strategic angles, and the occasional "we're totally just fishermen" act. Then comes the moment when your target realizes they're being followed. The sails on the merchant ship billow as they pick up speed. You do the same. The wind becomes your master, your enemy, your chaotic dance partner, and thus begins the chase. It is not cinematic. It is a long, tense drag race at 2 to 7 knots. You stand on deck for hours, adjusting sails, yelling, "Faster!" at the wind, and staring at a slowly shrinking gap between you and your would-be prize. Eventually, if fortune favors the petty and unwashed, you get close enough to fire a warning shot. This is a cannonball that's not meant to hit anything, just sail dramatically past the merchant ship's stern to say, "Hello, we're here to be unpleasant." Sometimes, that's enough. The target surrenders, raises a white flag, and resigns itself to being looted. Cheers, go up. The captain looks smug. The quartermaster begins practicing his condescending tone. Other times, the merchant crew does something profoundly annoying. They fight back. They unfurl their own cannons. They return fire. They shout things about honor, commerce, and going down with the ship. At this point, the pirate crew collectively rolls its eyes and prepares for boarding. Because now, it's time for battle. But that's for the next section. For now, let's focus on the final minutes of the hunt. The air is tense. Everyone is sweating, partly from adrenaline, partly from the heat, and partly because Jenkins set the powder room on fire last time and everyone's still emotionally processing that. The gun crew is prepping the cannons. Powder is measured. Shot is loaded. Wicks are lit. The deck is a flurry of purposeful motion and thinly veiled panic. The helmsman adjusts course. The sail crew tightens lines. The cook is sharpening a ladle, just in case. And then, finally, the ship is close. So close you can hear the other crew shouting. You can see faces wide with fear or narrowed in defiance. You can see the name painted across the stern, The Merry Providence. You snort. What a cheerful name for a soon-to-be crime scene. Your captain lifts his sword or possibly his ladle, depending on budget, and shouts a time-honored phrase like, "Run out the guns. Give 'em a taste of steel. Let's relieve them of their burden of wealth." Or simply, "Get 'em," which is less poetic but gets the job done. You're not just chasing a ship. You're chasing the brief, beautiful possibility of profit, real loot, real reward, a bag of coins, a crate of tobacco, a barrel of citrus that doesn't smell like mildew. It's the dream, dangled just out of reach for weeks, now finally within grappling hook distance. But dreams are dangerous, especially on the open sea, because every prize comes with risk, and every chase might end with someone floating face down next to a crate of cloves. The sails are drawn tight. The distance is gone. Your ship is now close enough to the target that you can make out individual crew members on their decks, some armed, some praying, some looking like they'd very much prefer to be somewhere else, possibly farming turnips. This is it, the attack. Forget the romanticized nonsense of pirates leaping dramatically from mast to mast, shouting stylish threats while somersaulting with pistols in both hands. Real pirate attacks were messy, chaotic, and frequently conducted by men who had forgotten which end of a pistol was the loud part. It starts with cannon fire. You don't just fire willy-nilly. Cannons are loaded carefully with powder, wadding, and shot, usually iron balls, but sometimes chain shot, 2 balls linked by a chain, for extra fun and a high chance of turning a mast into driftwood. The gunner does the honors, the wick is touched to the powder, and with a deafening boom, a part of the deck disappears into smoke. The recoil nearly knocks Jenkins overboard. Everyone cheers. Cannons fire from both ships now. The air thickens with smoke and splinters. It smells like burning rope, salt, and whatever the cook was boiling 2 decks below. The deck shakes. Shouts ring out, "Reload! Fire!" Someone stop Jenkins from lighting the same cannon twice. If you're lucky, your first shots damage the other ship's rigging or punch holes in its hull. If you're not lucky, they return the favor, and suddenly you're dodging cannonballs like you owe them money. Then comes the grappling. Pirate ships were not designed to destroy their targets. That's counterproductive. You want the cargo, not a floating bonfire. So instead, you get close, very close, and throw grappling hooks. These are heavy, clawed devices on ropes, hurled across the gap to snag railings, masts, or anything else that won't duck. Once the lines are pulled tight, the ships are locked together in what maritime experts refer to as a very bad idea. The distance between decks shrinks to a few planks. The smell of fear, sweat, and powder is now intimate. And then you board. Boarding is not elegant. There's no synchronized leaping or rehearsed choreography. There is shouting, there is climbing, there is a lot of slipping. You cross the gap however you can, by rope, by plank, by pure stubbornness. Some jump and miss. Some jump and land directly on a crate of pineapples. One man simply falls and is never seen again, unless you count the suspiciously fed-up shark that starts circling below. You, however, make it across awkwardly, breathlessly, and brandishing a cutlass you're not entirely sure how to use properly. The first thing you notice upon boarding is how loud it is. Pistols crack, men scream, swords clash. Someone shouts something vaguely inspirational like, "Take their biscuits," or "For Jenkins." The second thing you notice is that everything is slippery. Blood, seawater, stew from an overturned pot, it's all one big smear of doom. Every step is a gamble, every motion a potential slapstick death. You do your part. You parry, you flail, you duck. You mostly avoid dying. A merchant sailor swings at you with a belaying pin. You counter with a wildly hopeful jab of your cutlass and accidentally disarm him. He flees. You cheer quietly to yourself and try not to trip over his hat. There's no organized strategy. It's just two crews having an extremely aggressive disagreement at high volume. The merchant crew fights harder than expected. Probably because they don't want to lose their lives, cargo, or their one barrel of pickled onions. Pirates fight because they're used to it and because they've mentally spent the loot already. The noise is impossible to describe. Cannon fire from below decks continues, punctuated by shouting and the occasional victorious bellow. Pistols fire, usually once, and are then discarded because reloading takes longer than most sword fights. Blades clash, wood splinters. A man starts singing a shanty mid-duel for some reason. It's all quite surreal. And then, suddenly it's over. It doesn't end with a trumpet or a formal surrender. It ends when the merchant crew collectively decides they'd rather be looted than eviscerated. Someone drops their weapon. Another waves a dirty cloth. One man yells, "Fine, take the stupid onions," which may be the official signal of defeat. The pirates cheer. You don't, because you're sitting on a crate, wheezing and trying to remember which leg you stabbed someone with. You're covered in soot, sweat, and a little bit of rum, and you're not sure how that last one happened. Now comes the inventory. The quartermaster and a few trusted pirates, meaning anyone still upright and not bleeding excessively, go below deck to see what treasures await. You follow. The merchant ship's hold is dim, hot, and smells like damp optimism. You find crates. You open them. Sometimes it's coins. Sometimes it's spices. Once it's an entire crate of wigs, which causes brief confusion and one excellent impromptu fashion show. There are also barrels of food, sacks of flour, bolts of cloth, and miracle of miracles, a stash of citrus fruit so fresh it's still green. The crew gasps. Someone cries. Jenkins licks a lime and briefly believes in God again. Anything of value is loaded back onto your ship. The loot is noted down loosely and arguments about who gets what begin immediately, but formal division comes later. Before leaving, you take a moment to look around. The merchant crew is bruised, angry, and alive. You nod at one of them. He spits at your feet. That's fair. The captain decides whether to scuttle the ship, let it drift, or take it as a prize. Usually the answer depends on how seaworthy it is and how bored the crew feels. Today, mercy wins out. The merchant ship is left afloat, lighter in cargo and dignity. Back on your ship, the mood is celebratory. Wounds are tended, tales are exaggerated. Someone claims they fought 5 men at once. Someone else insists they caught a cannonball and threw it back. The cook begins making something festive, which is the most terrifying phrase he's ever used. You sit down with your stolen lime, bite into it, and wince as citrus acid meets scurvy-blasted gums. You don't care. It's glorious. For once, you feel like a real Puritano, a swab, not a deck rat, but a genuine terror of the sea. You fought, you won, you acquired aggressively discounted goods. But before you get too comfortable, remember, the loot still has to be divided, the sails repaired, and Jenkins has started singing again.